Hello and welcome to Virtual Investor Conferences. My name is Bob Power, and on behalf of OTC Markets, we're very pleased you've joined us for our next live presentation from Chilean Cobalt Corporation, a cobalt and copper exploration and development company. Please note you can submit questions in the box to the left of the slides. You can also view a company's availability for one-on-one meetings through the Schedule Meetings tab found on the conference platform. At this point, I'm very pleased to welcome Duncan Blunt, CEO and Director of Chilean Cobalt Corporation, which trades on the OTCQB venture market under the symbol COBA. Welcome, Duncan.
Thanks, Bob, and welcome everybody to our presentation today. As Bob mentioned, I'll be talking about Chilean Cobalt Corporation, a newly listed company here in the U.S., and our project La Cobaltera down in Chile. There's your standard disclaimer. Chilean Cobalt Corporation, or C3 for short. We're a U.S.-based, U.S.-listed critical minerals exploration and development company focused on our La Cobaltera project, a past-producing cobalt-copper project located in one of the world's few known primary cobalt districts. C3 was formed back in 2017 with the deliberate focus on developing a sustainable source of critical minerals. The board and management team are experienced in mining, in valuation, in mineral projects from exploration to development, and we're supported by a team of advisors and consultants with similar experience and expertise, particularly in South America and Chile. La Cobaltera is located in the San Juan district, a known past-producing cobalt district in northern Chile in the lower Atacama. And Chile itself is an excellent place to operate. A huge mining country, the world's largest copper producer and second largest lithium producer, and importantly, a U.S. free trade agreement country, which makes materials from Chile mined and or processed eligible for Inflation Reduction Act incentives for U.S. imports. La Cobaltera hosts cobalt and copper mineralization, as well as recent evidence of gold in a deeper quartz formation. We've done over 22,000 meters of drilling, started in 2018 and 2019, along with SRK Consulting, our independent technical advisors. We also did synthetic modeling that SRK led, and also published several reports. We have a large historical body of data over the past 100+ years that we validated with that work program and continue to do so with follow-on programs. We've developed a phased low capex approach to mine development, focusing on the oxides, with exploration continuing on the oxides, transition, and sulfide zones, as well as the vein system. Excellent infrastructure and accessibility, both in Chile as well as in the region. I'll go into that in the presentation. So the cobalt and copper market, deficits are expected almost regardless of whichever analyst or strategist or forecaster you're looking at. Deficits are expected for both metals, largely due to uptick in demand for cobalt, primarily driven from the EV electrification, lithium-ion batteries, and somewhat from legacy metal markets. The copper market is certainly driven by the EV theme as well, though more in the infrastructure and the charging. I like to say that copper is the connective tissue of everything electrical, and it's showing to be very true as copper demand continues to climb, both from traditional infrastructure and new electric infrastructure projects. Both cobalt and copper, there's been a dearth of exploration. Oftentimes they're located together. Chile is certainly one example of this. The biggest example is the DRC. Investment in exploration for copper and or cobalt together has been abysmal over prior years. You see there on the slide a great chart from S&P Global on the right, showing the big drop off in copper discoveries, despite exploration budgets remaining quite high. All in all, aside from new supplies being needed, better sources are needed for these minerals. Everything from human rights violations, which are most evident in the DRC, Democratic Republic of the Congo, where over 70% of cobalt is mined. It's host to some pretty egregious instances of human rights abuses. When you're looking at the second largest source of cobalt, Indonesia, at a distant 5 or 7% of the market, increasing issues including human rights, but more so on environmental degradation. Many of these new mines are laterite mines with low-grade material that exist in coastal or near coastal areas, where the mine runoff is threatening fisheries and other local communities. And combining all the upstream and the downstream, many markets in critical minerals, particularly cobalt as well as copper, are largely controlled by domestic Chinese downstream processing capacity. New supplies are needed of these minerals, and ideally from sources that are sustainable, particularly given the focus on critical mineral supply chains and ESG factors as well. At C3, we have a mission-driven resource development thesis. Our company is running itself as an innovator and leader that strives to be the most responsible supplier of critical mineral resources for the development of advanced materials and cleaner energy technologies that address the most pressing environmental and development issues. While we are just an exploration and development company, we've already drafted sustainability-focused goals, measures, and targets that are based on some of the leading standards, both GRI, ISSB, and IRMA, as well as other reporting standards that are emerging in the US SEC, as well as European regulations. So the district itself, the San Juan district where we operate, it's in Atacama Region 3, the lower Atacama, and Cobaltera is, as you can see here on the map, it is that number 4 section in the San Juan district. Historically, it was the largest area and most productive area of San Juan, effectively a district within a district, on a scale that sometimes even the San Juan district is called the La Cobaltera district. There's numerous past producing mines throughout the district, focused in La Cobaltera, with a historical flotation plant, tailings, and processing facilities located nearby. All are World War II era, certainly not going to be rehabilitated, but it does show that once upon a time there was fairly large commercial production. Continuous cobalt mining activity took place from about the mid-1800s until 1944, the end of World War II. During that period, cobalt grades of between 1% to over 15% were mined from open pit, mostly the oxides, and underground oxide and getting into some of the sulfide resources. Most importantly, the mine production and development ended as the war ended in World War II. Cobalt demand spiked as cobalt was used in jet engine turbines as a hardening alloy. That was the first engagement that used jet engines. So demand climbed very sharply, as it kind of is doing now with the battery theme. However, the war ended, thankfully. Demand collapsed and prices also fell. So these mines were completely left. The flotation plant tailings facilities were also left and effectively abandoned. And these properties reverted back into local private hands, where they saw a few generations of lower levels of activity. The copper on our property and surrounding district has been mined as recently as 2016. The oxide resources, anything about 1% or higher, is economic to truck to a facility that Inami, one of the national mining companies, has effectively a tolling plant in Vallenar, about 70 kilometers away. So the work program that we completed with SRK starting in 2018 was really to validate the enormous historical body of data that we already had, but certainly was not 43101 compliant. Hand-drawn maps, I've got some later that I'll show you in the slides, but everything from hand-drawn maps to tax and export records to private mining company records as well as some studies off and on from the U.S. Geological Survey on some of the cobalt vein systems in the district. Inami also published some reports and did some work in the late 80s and beyond on copper specifically in the area. And then most recently in 2017, Corfo and Serna Heomin, two Chilean government organizations, published a research report on the San Juan district and La Cobaltera, highlighting it as primary areas for cobalt development. The work program that we did, all listed here, fairly traditional in terms of the work process, everything from topography to trenching and mapping, geophysics, and then getting into diamond drilling, geochemical, technical reports, even some baseline geomechanical and environmental data has been collected as well. All of that more than validated the historical data and gave us a system that we believe we can replicate, looking at other areas of the district, certainly what we own, as well as potential acquisition areas nearby. The region has favorable geology all across. That's evident with the past production of both cobalt and copper, both together and separately. Interestingly, despite it being a fairly prolific district and basin, there hasn't been any modern or professional exploration done until we started taking over and consolidating some of the properties in the district. Geologically, it's a high volume hydrothermal system with three large copper trends, oxide transition and sulfide veins, sulfide zones, as well as a cobalt rich vein system that has evidence of gold mineralization at depth. The copper system, that three phase system, is a 20-kilometer strike, grades of copper anywhere between 0.5% to 1%, cobalt credits 0.2 to 0.4%, and the oxides go from about the surface, visible at surface, to 50 meters or so, transition ore another 50, and then sulfides starting at about 200 or going to about 200 and open at depth. As far as we've drilled, we've continued to hit sulfide occurrences. Overlapping that is a 12-kilometer strike cobalt vein system, high-grade cobalt vein system with 0.2 to 1% and higher cobalt grades. So we know this is a primary cobalt project. The upside is really in the sulfides as to how big, certainly the cobalt, but how big the copper gets as well. Past mining was mostly focused on the secondary ores, the oxide, as I'd mentioned, mineral bodies presented with ore grades of 6% and higher fairly recently. Underground, the sulfides are found in, or the cobalt, sorry, is found mostly in cobaltite mineralization, which is similar to the Idaho cobalt operation that Jervois has up in the U.S. We have a significant infrastructure advantage and excellent access to the property. Very importantly, it's at low altitude. Most of the new properties and exploration work being done in Chile is in the high Andes at an altitude of roughly Everest Base Camp level. We operate at an average altitude of 800 meters, which isn't sea level, but in Chile it certainly feels like sea level. At that level, it's dry weather. We can explore year round. There's no snow or freezing out, certainly. As you can see here on the map, we're very close to the coast. This red area is the La Cobaltera project area. The coast here is only 10 kilometers away. Up here in the north, the port of Huasco, which is a privately owned port by CAP, a listed iron ore export company, a miner and exporter in Chile. They own that terminal. There's some desalination potential there as well, and certainly export potential if an agreement is pursued there. Over this way to the east is Vallenar, the city, where that Inami copper plant and tolling facility is, about 70 kilometers away. There's good roads. This yellow line is a road network. As you can see, it cuts through the spine of La Cobaltera. Only small support roads will ever need to be drilled or built. and a very close regional grid tie-in. Here to the right, you can see the line that's a high voltage power line, 15 kilometers away. And as we're in the Atacama Desert, there's a very high level of irradiation, so solar potential is very real. Importantly, there's no local communities on site, so won't ever have to relocate people. And there's labor as well as places to stay. We don't need a large camp on site. Labor nearby in the towns of Freirina and Vallenar. Our phased development strategy focuses on effectively mining what's easiest to the most difficult, and that also is how they exist geologically. The oxides, as you can see here in the schematic, the top 50 meters, followed by transition, roughly the next 50 meters, and then the sulfides, starting at about 100, 120 meters, open at depth. You can see here on the top left, here's one map of one of the historic pits, a series of pits that could potentially be completed or combined into a super pit, or just reopened and expanded, probably at width and as well as at depth. That's one thing that we're investigating, the reopening and certainly delineation of the oxide resources. The transition ore, we'll need to do some metallurgical work on that. We've done some metallurgical work on the oxides. Simple leaching seems effective for good recoveries. And then we'll continue to do work on the sulfide exploration. SRK had completed synthetic modeling, primarily on that oxide development, looking at various scenarios, effectively looking at a base case of capex of 200 to 250 million for 10,000 tons per day throughput, mining estimated head grade of and those figures are switched, but 1% copper and 0.25% cobalt, projecting about 3 to 5,000 tons per year of cobalt and 20 to 25,000 tons per year of copper. Those are scoping level numbers, effectively internal, but we continue to progress exploration and work towards a pre-feasibility study on open pit. The high impact exploration potential is largely, it's certainly the oxide, understanding those and delineating those, but the big upside exploration story is in the sulfides, where we're targeting a 43101 mineral resource estimate on some prospects there. Also, we'll be doing additional drilling to verify the assumptions from SRK's synthetic modeling. And also worth noting, all across the property as a symptom of the past production, there's a few tailings piles that are dry and inert, but we've done some initial bioleach testing that was successful. Showed that there's both copper and cobalt, and that the bioleaching process can likely enhance recovery of those. And there's also several dozens of waste rock piles that are worth further investigation. They could be gateways to near-term production, as well as some remediation of those areas. The senior management team, led by myself, my background for the past 7 years or so, I've been on the corporate side, running mining companies and an oil company as well. Prior to that, I spent 10 years in the hedge fund world as an analyst and portfolio manager focused on metals and mining in emerging markets. Ignacio Moreno, our country manager, he has public and private sector experience in Chile, having been the former mining undersecretary and deputy development manager at Inami. He was also the CEO of one of the mining companies, private mining companies in the San Juan district, as well as beyond. So he's got valuable experience. Based in Santiago. I'm based here in Miami. Jeremy and Jim, our COO and CFO. Jeremy comes from a background in fund management, and helps us on operations and compliance. Jim Van Horn, our CFO, a finance and accounting expert who has done an excellent job in bringing us public and helping navigate things. Felipe Quinzio, our administration in Chile. Most importantly, he also has an engineering background, so understands aspects of the project as well as helping keep our licenses and everything in order. Board of Directors, Greg Levinson, the chairman, one of the founding shareholders of C3 and the past interim CEO prior to me stepping in. Geraldine Barnuevo, a recent addition that we press released her and Fiona, I believe last week. Geraldine is an independent director, environmental and sustainability strategist, 20 plus years of experience. She's currently VP of Sustainability at GE Aviation, and prior to that had a very similar role at General Motors, where she worked in the U.S. as well as in South America. Fiona Clowder, another new addition to our team and independent director, diplomat and business professional focused on Latin America. She's based in London. Was very recently, 2014 to 2018, the UK ambassador to Chile. And interestingly, her role overlapped with Ignacio Moreno, our country manager. So they were familiar with each other prior to Fiona coming on board. So we're glad to have her. And she's also a senior advisor to Appian Capital. Andy Sloop, independent director that we've had on the team for about a year or so. He's the head of our ESG committee. And he's ESG and sustainability subject matter expert. He's currently the Global Zero Waste and Circularity Director at Nike. Myself and Ignacio are also on the board. In terms of recent milestones and next steps, we've finalized the full listing on the US OTCQB exchange. Our ticker is COBA, C-O-B-A, abbreviation for cobalt. We're not yet trading. We're listed but not trading, kind of sitting in purgatory. We've applied for DTC eligibility and should be receiving that in a matter of weeks. So expect to be trading fairly soon. In addition to that, we're continuing investigation of near-term production potential from those oxide resources, working towards a PFS on that. We haven't begun it yet, but that's our objective on that front. And we're initiating a follow-up exploration program focused on mapping, not just mapping the oxides, but also mapping some of the areas that we'll need to look at for potential road development and mineral and mine development. Also looking at continued exploration program, looking at the sulfides and some of the transition ore. Following on from the mapping program, we're going to be shooting geophysics and topography. We'll follow on that with sampling and trenching, and then eventually drilling, probably 6 to 9 months from today. Continue to engage with potential strategic partners for investment and future offtake of critical minerals, both cobalt and copper. Speaking with kind of the usual suspects, U.S. automakers, some European automakers, Asian battery manufacturers in Korea and Japan, particularly those that have plans for gigafactories in the U.S., and some of the emerging U.S. cobalt refineries that we're talking with, as well as European battery manufacturers, looking at Europe and the U.S., as Chile has an advantageous trading status in the EU as well. We'll continue to finalize a full cycle sustainability strategy for all phases of project through exploration, development, production, and even end of life for the mine. We'll continue to look at technology offerings. There's a lot of technology that might not be taking technology risk, but still bringing cutting edge technology to the mining space. Looking at some artificial intelligence applications, particularly on exploration, given the large body of data that we have. Looking at bioleaching, as mentioned, certainly some drone-based activities in terms of mapping, much cheaper and more scalable than using a helicopter, and things like that. Also looking at further district consolidation in the La Cobaltera project area and somewhat into the broader San Juan district. And then also continue to investigate downstream integration for in-country value add in Chile. As I mentioned, Chile being a free trade agreement country means that materials are eligible for IRA incentives effectively no matter what's exported. Some maps I'll show quickly. Here's what we hold. This map shows the brownfield exploration focus of our last drilling campaign. You could see we primarily targeted the known vein systems and succeeded in validating that. The mapping that we're looking at now, you can see where the mapping was. We're going to be looking at some of the more greenfield areas in that purple box that the map does not overlap. Some of the historical data, hand-drawn maps and production figures, things like that. Certainly helpful in not just in looking at them for context, but also geolocating these with the new geophysics map that we may shoot and have done in the past. Interestingly, a lot of these maps will show, given they were drawn 50 to 100 years ago, they will show past production areas that we can investigate further. Some pictures from our exploration campaign, our drilling in 2018 and 2019. There's the World War II era mining and processing facilities in the district. Open pit mine sites, of which there's many. These are from Google Earth on the La Cobaltera area. Underground mine sites as well, shafts, and including some ventilation shafts. Advanced development given the time, and many adits, hundreds of adits across the district and including our project area. I see there's some questions, so I'll get into that now. One question: our capital position, any need to raise capital in the next year? Currently, cash in the bank, we have a little over 1.1 million in terms of our burn rate. Our low burn status right now, that will last us about a year. So we're not urgently looking to raise capital, but as I mentioned, continuing to engage with some strategic partners, and we believe potentially one or multiples of those could result in funding opportunity, whether it's pre-production offtake financing or a strategic private placement or something like that. But we anticipate in the next 6 to 9 months to have some more visibility on that. Drill program scheduled, not scheduled at the moment. We will be conducting a mapping program, which is the first step on the greenfield area, and then we'll be using some work to combine the mapping and trenching that we've done on the brownfield area, see how the mineralization extends into the greenfield area, look for anomalies and investigate them on the ground with soil sampling, rock sampling, trenching, and ultimately drilling. So probably we'll be drilling, call it in 6 to 12 months from now is what we're looking at least in the greenfield area. We may look to potentially acquire a small drilling rig to do some development drilling, de-risking on the oxides. You can punch a hole 30 to 50 meters to do that. So that might happen as well, but we'll update on that accordingly. Our team's operating experience in Chile. My experience is as an investor, having been to Chile many times. Now, for over a year running Chilean Cobalt. The rest of the team have largely been with the company since inception, 2016, at least 2017. Ignacio Moreno, our country manager, has deep experience in Chile, again, private and public, the former Undersecretary of Mining. And our board, the most notable Chilean experience is with Fiona, having been the ambassador from the UK to Chile. We have others, people that are not yet mentioned in the presentation, advisors and consultants that have extensive experience, both geology and engineering. Some advisors in the U.S., people on the ground in Chile, and we'll be detailing those team members in the coming weeks. Another question about our land package and project: has it been previously mined? Yes, it has. Not to exhaustion. Certainly, some of the oxide resources, the visible copper oxide and visible cobalt oxide, that's been mined. We don't expect to be mining 10 to 15% cobalt going forwards. That would be nice. We may find pockets of certain high grade mineralization, but in terms of those grades, that's largely been mined. but by no means has this been exhausted. And it was also mined using technology from 1900 or 1920, which suffice it to say is has been advanced upon from now. So we see this as a brownfield district with greenfield potential, not just on new exploration, but on extensions from the development that has happened, both along strike and at depth as well. That's all the questions that we have for now. So I'll leave it at that. My contact details are here. Feel free to email me. You can find more on our website, ChileanCobaltCorp.com, and stay tuned for updates on our listing and press releases and all.